I will go ahead and get us started for today for our workshop with Dare Williams. So I'm just going to read some remarks from an about statement from us, and then I'm going to hand it off to our intern Shalini, who's going to tell us a little bit about access for today's session. So that's just what I'm going to be saying. That's going to be linked in the chat as well. So we're Open Mouth Literary Center, which is a nonprofit literary organization based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. We host a monthly poetry reading and workshop with our visiting writers, as well as an annual retreat and festival, a residency for local writers here in Northwest Arkansas, and extended classes. Our goal is to bring local poets and poetry lovers in contact with nationally touring poets to create community through writing. At each of our readings, we have an opening round of 10 or so readers who will read a single poem in rapid succession before we have a featured reader, and we're doing that later today. The slots for that reading are full, but we're always excited to have new opening readers. So let us know if you'd like to be one of those opening readers in the future. You can fill out a form that Gwen is going to link in the chat as well. Definitely get in touch with us if that's something you're interested in doing. You can get more information about our future events on our website, where you can also sign up for our newsletter that we send out every couple of weeks, promoting events like this one. You can also follow our events on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, where we post that. And we also post prompts and poems from other folks who've been at our events if you want to see what our open mouth community has been up to. We also pay all of our featured readers, and we've taken steps to increase accessibility at all of our events by reading our access statement, providing documents and ASL interpretation, captioning the recordings, and using image descriptions on social media. We also actively solicit feedback from our community to keep improving our programs. We're going to link a survey form that we would love to have you fill out in a second. We invite attendees to pay what they can to help continue these services. The only way that we can sustain this work is to receive the support from all of our community members whenever possible. So you can help sustain this work by giving regularly through our Patreon, donating at the link on our website, and continuing to come to our events. You can also make one-time donations for workshops like this using PayPal, Venmo, or Cash App, which we'll have links for soon in the chat. All donations go directly towards supporting these events. And thank you so much for helping to ensure that these programs are accessible to everybody. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Shalini just to talk a little bit more about access for today.
Hi, everyone. So for our access statement, we have been working to make our programs more accessible, both for this online format and when we are able to have in-person readings and workshops again. And we are taking the step of highlighting access features on Zoom, providing an ASL interpreter for our monthly readings and workshops, as well as collecting and offering visual aid materials. And we've also completed a course with an accessibility consultant to better understand and apply the principles of universal design. And we are very excited about the accessibility that online events provide. And because of this format, we are able to reach people who might not otherwise be able to make our events because of everything from distance to immune issues and physical access barriers. And when we return to an in-person format, we will follow guidelines put forth by immunocompromised and high-risk people to ensure events are as safe as possible. And we now plan to make sure all of our future in-person readings and workshops are in a hybrid format, simultaneously cast online. Workshops will be made available on our Patreon for a small fee, and readings will be on Patreon for 1 month, and thereafter will be available on YouTube. And here's what you guys can do to help us ensure this space remains accessible. Please mute your microphone when you're not speaking to help cut down on distractions and background noise, and be aware if you're taking up a lot of space, and try to make room for everyone. And you can use the raise hand feature or post in the chat if you want to say something. Try to speak slowly and clearly for others to hear you and for the ASL interpreter to follow. And use the slow down button in the Zoom reactions if things are moving too fast. Also, be aware that people may have different levels of comfort speaking and interacting in the space, and allow everyone to participate on their own terms. And if you feel comfortable, share your pronouns by editing your name to include them. And you can message one of us if you need instructions on how to do this. Also, please give a content warning if what you're about to share might cause someone else discomfort. And if you feel comfortable, please provide a visual description of yourself when you are on camera. And remember that this is your space to use respectfully as you need. You're free to turn off your camera, use the chat function, or make any requests as you need. Try to remain patient with the technology and be mindful that not everyone here has the same resources or internet connectivity. And look for links in the chat to access copies. And for workshops, we will also be sending out a recording of this event afterwards to all the attendees via email.
Thank you so much for reading that and getting us all on the same page. Yeah, so we just like to make sure everybody is aware of the different ways of engaging with this space. And yes, we're going to try and send out a recording for this later. But just so we can go ahead and get started, I'm going to read Dare's bio and then hand it off so we can get started. So Dare Williams is a queer HIV positive poet and artist rooted in Southern California, a 2019 PEN America Emerging Voices Fellow. He has received support and fellowships for his work from John Ashbery Home School, The Frost Place, Brooklyn Poets, Breadloaf, and Tin House. He was the co-curator of the West Hollywood Literature Festival in 2021. Dare's poetry has been nominated for a Pushcart Prize, Best of the Net, and Best American Poets. His work has been featured in Foglifter, Had, The Shore, Exposition Review, West Trade Review, and elsewhere. We are delighted to have him here. Dare Williams.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dare. It's so good to be here. Thank you, CD, for inviting me and Open Mouth. I love Open Mouth. I was saying earlier, I was born in Arkansas, but I didn't grow up there. So I have this connection to Open Mouth. I love them. Okay, so I thought what we would do is I would talk a little bit about my inspiration for this workshop. And then I want it to be interactive as much as possible and just invite you into my living room, my lab, to see what I was thinking about during all of this. And we're gonna look at some poems, and then I have some prompts for you all, and hoping at the end, after our generative writing time, you'll be willing to share. So I've been thinking about this quote, I guess, that I had the pleasure of seeing the great poet Patricia Smith read from the podium when I was at the Kate and Kingsley Tufte Awards. And Patricia says, "People turn to the news for the news, but look to the poets for the truth. And we must tell our stories or someone else will." And I've also been thinking about how we are living in unprecedented times every day. Like, I just want to be living in precedented times, right? And so I was thinking about bureaucracy. And this was inspired by Divya Victor reading from her award-winning book, Curb. So I thought one of the things we could do to sort of open up the space is there an application or a form or a petition you've recently filled out that you found frustrating or unpleasant? And you can put it in the chat or you can just blurt it out. I'd love to hear from you all. Yes. MFA application, 100%. Yes. Anxiety, depression screening at psych office. Yes. All of them, all of the time. Yes. Job applications. Yes. Why are we filling out online job applications and then they want a paper application as well, right? All of that. Yes. Yes. University conference registration reimbursement. Yes. Chasing the money. Yes, yes. Name change. Yes. Yeah. And so, yeah. So I guess a little bit about me. When I was growing up, my household was super chaotic. Lots of mental illness, lots of addiction, very loud. And if I was going to survive, I had to get small and be quiet. And how was I able to do that? Well, a journal and a pen is very quiet, right? I was always thinking like those kids that play musical instruments, like how, like you're always able to be found, you know, if you played the tuba, you're like, you always knew where that person was. And we also grew up under this like heavy ceiling of debt. And it just felt like everything was really hard and that a way out or help seemed impossible. But it also felt like, you know, my mom was a single mom and she was always having to like apply for things that like we could never quite get, you know. And in my work, I think I'm always looking at like connection and negotiation in relationships and love and desire and grief. And when I'm thinking about love, I'm really thinking about power and who hasn't, who has it, who doesn't have it, who benefits from that. And I always have this like hammer and chisel of why, like, okay, why? And then I get an answer and like, why, you know? And what Divya was talking about made me think about how America has many cruel handshakes, right? And what does it mean to be a citizen in this country? And what does it mean to be a poet living in America today? And we're all trying to live our lives every day with these challenges, but there's this humming in the background that is bureaucracy and these ways in which we are needing to either get services or accomplish something, and we're having to fill out forms. And one of the interesting things that Divya does is her use of government forms and petitions to examine and tell stories. And I was so struck by how she was able to explain how paper pushing, filing, forms, petitions are a kind of border that can cause stress, harm, difficulty in achieving assistance, or can fracture relationships and is meant to complicate and exhaust us. And I've been thinking about how it erases our human qualities for sure. Like an example would be these dating apps, you know, in the about me section, I never quite know how to fill those out because I don't feel like it represents me fully or renders me fully. And they're always asking to pick tribes, which is, you know, already problematic, or interests. And then they give you like a certain amount that you can pick from, right? And I'm like, but I want more, or I don't want these options, or what's going on here, right? And so we're kind of put in these boxes. And as an HIV positive poet, my info is on so many forms. But the forms erase the story of my life. And my life is punctuated by doctor visits, labs, social services, mental health visits. And I think, how many forms have I filled out with all my info on it? And where do they all go? And who reads it? And do those forms help or hinder, you know? And part of my queerness for me is all about negotiating how much to disclose or withhold on certain forms and to police myself. So I wanted to ask everyone, when you hear the word bureaucracy, what do you think? What comes to mind? And you can just unmute or share in the chat.
I picture a tower. I picture a tower just full of cis white dudes in suits, and they sit around in tables at various levels, and they make selections or they make deletions as they see fit. And it's not really based on anything that's tangible or makes sense.
Yes. Yes, in the chat, dread, pointlessness, time suck, red tape, yes, a slow process, physical papers, gatekeeping, yes, endless waiting, citizenship, busy work, barriers, checkpoints, yes. Data is the language of bureaucracy, my boss, Sylvia says. Statistics, yes, for sure. So I looked some up and bureaucracy, a system of administration marked by officialism, red tape, proliferation. Literally means rule by desks and offices. And so I thought, well, how can we as poets use language to enact our experience of living within this system of bureaucracy, which is constantly humming in the background of our lives? As poets, we have these special powers in that we also become masters of language, which allows us to interrogate language that aims to control us. So I thought we would look at some poems with this idea in mind, and certainly poems that have America in mind. And then I would love to hear what strikes you or where you see bureaucracy happening. And then we'll look at some prompts and explore ways that we can start to construct something, subvert power, shift power, and world build using this idea. And I would love this for this to be a space of inquiry, exploration, and play. So can everyone access this Google Doc in the chat? If you can't, let me know or do a thumbs down emoji. Okay, so the first poem I thought we would look at is from Divya Victor from Curb, and it is called First Petition. Would anyone be willing to read this poem for us?
I wouldn't mind reading it.
Go for it.
Okay, let me pull it up. Okay, first petition. It is a Thursday and no one out on this long street. Looks like your mother, so you go home. Wrap yourself in form I-130, knit a nest with a ballpoint pen, limb your can inside a placeholder, smooth your limbs into a square to beg for a place for your first space. Her. Write a name into the petition, and then improbable syllables. No one calls her by this name in the elsewhere because they know her fish market habit. Purse tucked at the waist, sorry pleats pulsing like flushed gills. No one except the man who will ask her, ma'am, can you name 2 national holidays? And ma'am, who lived in America before the Europeans arrived? So you plan it out, letter by letter in letters, your mouth cupped to her cataracts. Mom, just listen and answer the man who asked how she came to know you, if she intends to remain here. And sir, for how long have you known that Ma was a bowl made for 2, brimming beyond any border, red as the arrival of her face 7 years later? A paper apparition drawn closer and closer to you by cue, unnodding at a frayed horizon in an airport when it is a Thursday and suddenly she walks through the passport photograph you once stapled at the edge of a petition to anchor her wound to your migrating heart.
Thank you so much for reading that. I'll give you a couple minutes just to sit with it and let it sink in. So what strikes you from this poem immediately?
I mean, I think that what is really evident in this poem, and I think like in your remarks earlier, is like this idea of bureaucracy being this thing that demands us to like diminish our experience, almost like reduce our experience, because like the feelings are so complicated, right? But you have to wrap yourself in form I-130 and like feel all these feelings and have an output at the end of it. I think that like the form is like a funnel for this experience to be ignored by the world at large.
Yeah, and because it's so cold, right? Like bureaucracy is cold and clerical and is absence of experience. There's something interesting though, where it's in some ways like I was thinking about like an application that asks you to put down a description either of self or person. It has this effect of almost building like a snow person, right? Because you're putting down like this person is this height, this weight, hair color, eye color. And so you're like building and rendering them in a way. And I'm thinking about how, wrapping oneself in this form is like the closest that this person, the speaker, can get intimate, right, with the mother.
I like that you said wrapping, especially because of the emphasis on the sorry and how that iterates the subject as animal in conjunction with knitting a nest, flushed gills. And if you're not familiar with how to fold a sari, it's just many, many, many yards of material. So to the naked eye, it's nothing, it's just cloth. But if you know what it is, you know that it's a garment.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I'm thinking also about what does the second person do as a reader? Oh, can you hear me? Okay. And there's also what's happening here at the end, right? Like, is the person walking through, is that real or is that a wish? Fulfilled, unfulfilled? I find that interesting as well. These bookended by these Thursdays. Yeah, Natalie says, I see the second person as an invitation plea for intimacy.
I mean, I think the question of like, is the ending like a wish? It's what is really being wished for here. If we view like if we view the second person in this context as a vehicle for manufacturing closeness in this narrative, like I think the question of what is being wished for is complicated by sort of like the loneliness of the bureaucratic process.
Yeah, and one of the things I'm thinking about is at the presentation, Divya mentioned that in applications and petitions, there was a note where it requires you to include photographs of your family. And there's all these rules that you cannot include, which is like showing a certain amount of skin or sort of intimacy. And so she really talked about like in the forms, you can tell what America feels about relationships and family, right? And how they view that 100%. Sarah, yes, in addition to Natalie's point, I think it also forces the reader to figure out their own relationship to language and history. Yes. Luke, embodiments of ideas, the poem, the container of bread breaking. Yes. Okay, so let's move on to the next poem. So selfishly, this poem does not really, it doesn't use a form per se, but I am always trying to read Essex Hemphill with folks in a group and teach him. And one of the reasons why I included it here is because it certainly has America in mind, it has systems in mind. And I also think about what's going on in this poet's life at the time that this was written. This was published in 1992. I will speculate that it was probably written before that. Essex Hemphill died of complications of AIDS. He was a Black queer man. And also, his books are out of print. And that is being worked on. It's escaping me who is sort of leading that charge, but it sounds like the collected and selected of Essex Hemphill is coming soon. But one of the reasons why his books are out of print is because he did not have a will. And I think of, okay, why, right? And then, do I have a will? And oh, that sounds really complicated. That's, like, that sounds really complicated. And again, it's like bureaucracy, paperwork, frustrated, complicated. Would anyone be willing to read this poem?
I would love to.
Thanks, Rita.
Okay. American Wedding. In America, I place my ring on your cock where it belongs. No horsemen bearing terror, no soldiers of doom will swoop in and sweep us apart. They're too busy looting the land to watch us. They don't know we need each other critically. They expect us to call in sick, watch television all night, die by our own hands. They don't know. We are becoming powerful. Every time we kiss, we confirm the new world coming. What the rose whispers before blooming, I vow to you. I give you my heart, a safe house. I give you promises other than milk, honey, liberty. I assume you will always be a free man with a dream. In America, place your ring on my cock where it belongs. Long may we live to free the stream.
Thank you so much for reading that. Yeah, let's just soak it in for a minute. Yeah, so I think about like, what is the occasion of a poem, right? Like sometimes when I read a poem, I have to sit with it and think, okay, what was in place at the time? Like what systems and rules and laws were in place at this time? Gay men couldn't get married. That ring is also a time marker in a bit of queerness. So Viagra wasn't approved until 1996 and didn't come on the market till 1998. So there's a function to that ring as well. What are some thoughts?
I love how this poem it recognizes how difficult bureaucracy is. And again, thinking about the institution of marriage, people ascribe all sorts of things, religious, social, political, but all Essex says in here, or Essex writes in here, is I place my ring on your cock where it belongs. Like, he just totally simplifies it. It's like, I want you to have this ring, so I'm going to give it to you. And that is an outward symbol of my commitment towards you. And there's really nothing more or nothing, it's nothing more than that, nothing less than that. And both parties are in agreement and have an understanding of what that symbolizes, and kind of cuts out all the other noise. So it takes bureaucracy and basically eliminates it.
Yeah, and it pushes against tradition, right? Because the ring is somewhere else. And I love that the poem opens with, I place my ring. And then towards the end, it closes with, place your ring on me, right? So there's this exchange of vows. I also just love that he refuses to capitalize America. And I'm reading that as just like a refusal for respect. Because as an institution, right? Like, he's not recognized. His love isn't recognized either. I'm very curious about this break in the stanza. It feels like it allows for a change where the lens is pointed observation of the oppressors and then switching over to vows. Yeah, dynamic. The way the poem started with love and subtly shifted to laws, government. Yeah. The word cock in poems doesn't usually hit for me, but it is working here. Yes. Prince says, I find it a little sarcastic, like the speaker knows that intimacy is more complicated with that, but they're meeting America where it is. Yes, yes. Okay, so let's move on to the third poem. So this poem comes with a content warning. It is by Paul Tran, and it addresses sexual violence. So if that is something you prefer not to engage with, please read the fourth poem by Kyle Dysuyan. And when it is time to move on to prompts, I will put that in the chat or try to put a heart emoji in my screen. And I'll go ahead and read this one. Incident report after Monica Yoon. I had a form. The form said name of victim. The form named me. The form was a form of naming. Naming gave me a form. The form said time of incident. Time could be measured. The incident could be defined. Both had a form. Both were a form of naming. The form said age. Age could be measured by time. Age could be defined by the incident. The incident occurred on the night before my 21st birthday. The time was night as night became night. The incident occurred in my room at the time. The time occurred to me after the incident. The form said race or ethnicity. Both were constructed. Both marked me. Both had a form. Both were a form of naming. Naming was marking. I marked the form. Asian, bottom, for now. I constructed myself. Looking for fun. No strings attached. I was unremarkable. The form said sex. The form listed my options. I had no option. I went along with sex. The sex had a name. I won't say the name. Both marked me. The form said affiliation. Everything started out fine. The form said residence. I unlocked the door. I misread affiliation as affliction. The name entered. I misread residence as residual. The name kissed me. The form said alcohol or drugs used at the time of incident. I was having a good time. The form said relationship with the assailant prior to incident. I did the thing I was good at. The form said type of coercion or force involved. The name hit me. The form said, please specify. The name choked me. The form said ability to consent was inhibited by. The name pressed a white towel against my face. The form said, please specify. The towel smelled like sugar. Please specify. An ice cream truck drove by. Please. I heard the song. So I'll give you a few moments to just sit with that. So in an interview with Electric Lit, Paul says, for example, when I appropriate the bureaucratic lexicon of incident or progress report forms, and when I complete the forms with responses that I wish I'd given or responses I wasn't permitted to give, I'm revising and therefore erasing what actually happened, what the bureaucracy of the original form denied me, by incorporating my more complete truth and representing myself and what happened to me on my own terms and in my own words. Does anyone have any thoughts?
I'm really interested in the beginning of with the multiple definitions of the word form. Like the form was a form, but there's a blatant absence of form as verb, right? It's like the report reduces things to a list of nouns here, which is and the nouns become more ominous, and because of like the restrictive language of the report, it's like the name becomes like so like the name choked me, the name pressed a white towel against my face. It comes to mean more because we're trying to like stuff all this experience into these simple words, I think.
Yeah, I had noticed like the capitalization of time, age, incident, name, like those then become the characters. Yeah, the CD. Yeah, Prince, that too. Like the single lines, right? They're like an inventory, length of a poem similar to the length of pain, time filling out a form. Each line its own stanza, each part of the form a different struggling. And almost how each line could be the first line of a poem. Like I'm always kind of looking at that. And Paul talks a lot about that, their inspiration for, or one of the devices they used in the book was the Greek rhetorical form of a chiasmus, which is like a cage within a cage. So like A, B, B, A, right? Truth, beauty is truth, truth, beauty. And what it does is it signals emotional entrapment. Yeah, Prince. So I want to give us some time to write. So I've got some prompts and I'm going to put in the chat. Prompt time for anyone who took a break there. So I'll read these prompts. Okay, so in recent years, I've seen something shared on the internet called application for Cuddle Buddy. So someone wants to meet you. Write out the petition of you that they would need to fill out in order to be considered. That's one prompt. Another option, think of a time when you felt absolute bliss or loved, however you define that, and write the incident report. Take inspiration from Paul regarding erasure revising. Include a detail you wished you had happened. Erase a detail you wish hadn't happened. Maybe you want to bring someone into the memory, or maybe you don't want someone there. And just mine the archive. Engage with your senses. Another option is Google intake forms, petitions, or applications. Choose every sixth word or whichever words ring for you. Write those down and create a word bank. From that word bank, write a complaint poem, complaint about a government agency, the DMV, IRS, unemployment, academia. Let the words be your guide, but also feel free to divest from them as well. Maybe those words become a list you can't use. And fourth, read Grant Application by Kyle Dasuyan. Write a poem that refuses what a grant residency fellowship application is asking of you. And let's see, I'll do 10 minutes on the clock, and then we'll have some time for sharing. How are we doing? I know that's not a lot of time to write, but hopefully you'll continue. Would anyone be willing to share anything they have? Or share which prompt you chose.
I'll share a little bit.
Oh, hey, thanks, Sarah.
Hi. So I selected application for Cuddle Buddy. So this is what I have so far. Know the difference between cuddling and snuggling. Then tell me, because I don't know the difference. If I seem still, I'm enjoying it, I promise. Do you ever feel like holding a new person is like holding an animal? Wild, isn't it? I'll say from the jump, I'm touch-starved, insatiable. There's never been more of me to touch than ever before in my life, meaning, well, you know, more to lose. I should sound more official. I should sound more explicit. I should make a sound you can actually hear other than lonely, other than noise to mask the lonely. I, like everyone else, am a massive amount of vibrating particles. Sometimes it can be felt by a partner. Don't freak out. Don't hold me tighter. Let me be.
What? Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah. I hope you're seeing the chat. That's so good. Anyone else? Okay, I'm gonna put my email because I would love to read all of your poems and what came of this. And we're just nearing time. So if anyone has any comments, questions, complaints to the department, feel free to speak up or put it in the chat. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for hanging out with me and exploring all of this with me and just being here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing those poems, sharing your wisdom with us, Dare. That was really wonderful. Yeah, thinking a lot about forms and like the form of forms, which sounds really silly, but like all of omission. It's just so wonderful. Yeah, these prompts are wonderful. And then yeah, excited to think about what I will do with them. But thank you all so much for coming. It's really delightful to have everyone so engaged and excited about this. Again, we do this every month, so please come back.